My name is Benjamin Blodgett. I am from Johns Hopkins University. I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about the university, some of the majors that we offer, and of course to show you how to prepare a dish. I give you guys a little bit of my background before we dive in. I am an alum, meaning I attended the university a while back. I went to the Miami campus when that one was still open. It has since closed. But after that, I went into the industry. I worked as a corporate trainer. I worked as a personal chef. I even went into education, teaching a culinary program just like this one. Now I'm here. I work for the university. I go around to different high schools, talk to students, tell them about the university and what they can get out of some of our different majors. I cover all of New England, New York, New Jersey, so I'm kind of all over the area. So that's why I'm here today. So because of the nature of my demonstration and what I'm showing you, we do have to dive right in and start preparing our first ingredient. But I bounce back and forth between talking about the food and talking about the university as well. So at any time, if you have a question, just let me know, raise your hand. And I will need one volunteer in just a moment. So first things first, who here likes sushi? Anybody? 1, 2, 3, most of us, good, excellent. So we're gonna be learning how to make sushi, specifically vegetarian sushi. All my ingredients are already out here. You don't see any raw fish or cooked fish. But we always need to start with the rice. If you didn't know, sushi is all about the rice. It's not about the fish, right? If you are in the kitchen and you're making rice, typically you use some type of long grain rice. Maybe you're cooking some jasmine rice or some basmati rice. Those are both types of long grain rice. When you cook them, they're very aromatic. They cook out nice and fluffy, but they're not sticky. And in order to make sushi, we need sticky rice. So instead, we use a type of short grain rice. This is called sushi rice. That is the specific variety of rice. You may have used short grain rice before to make risotto. You have to use arborio rice to make risotto. Although I have used sushi rice to make risotto, it works just as well. Part of the reason why is inside this rice, in addition to those obvious physical differences, right? The kernels are shorter and stubbier. There's also a difference on the molecular level as well. There's different types of starches inside different types of rices. All rice has a starch called amylose inside of it. It's shaped like a stick or a pen, not a whole lot of surface area. But in our short grain rice, there's a second type of starch here. It's shaped like a T. It's called amylopectin. Because of that increase in shape and size, it's actually stickier, right? It has more surface area, easier to stick to more objects. So that's what we're going to use here. This way we get that sticky rice. In a minute here, my volunteer is going to have to go into the kitchen to rinse our rice. We don't have a sink here, so you'll be going back there. But I use a fine mesh strainer to rinse the rice. We use cold running water. If you use hot, depending on the type of water, or excuse me, the type of pipes that you have, it might be, the hot water might be cloudy. So we use cold water to see the clarity of the water. As you're rinsing it, what's going to happen here is the rice is going to be washed. You're getting rid of all of the dust and debris from storage and transportation of the rice, right? And you're getting rid of some of that excess amylose, that first type of starch that we don't want. Here's our rice back. Thank you so much. 1 cup, perfect. So when you are making rice, any type of grain really, you have to know the ratio of liquid to grain or starch in order to properly cook that product. Typically with long grain rice like jasmine or basmati, you might use 2 parts liquid to 1 part grain. That's going to make sure your rice turns out very fluffy, it's fully cooked, it isn't crunchy at all. Other varieties of grains, you might use more liquid. For example, wild rice, you use 3 parts liquid to 1 part grain. With our sushi rice though, we're using equal parts. For 2 reasons. The first one is that we use a liquid-based seasoning, so we need a little bit of space inside our kernels to absorb that liquid. But we also need the right texture to our rice. We know it needs to be sticky, but it also needs to have a little bit of mouthfeel to it. If it's mushy, when I go to eat it, that's going to ruin the whole piece of sushi, the whole roll really. So we use only 1 cup of water here. I use a rice cooker. I always like to swirl the bowl first. That's what I was doing there, to make sure that there's no rice kernels sticking to the side of the bowl. And I use the rice cooker for convenience, but also consistency. If you make rice at home and you don't have one of those, they're the best kitchen tool in the world. They turn out perfect rice 99% of the time. You can absolutely make rice on a stovetop, in an oven, etc. But it's not always consistent, right? Sometimes you might have little spots on the side or on the bottom of the pot that burn. I can't have that in my sushi rice. I need to make sure that all the kernels are sticky when I go to use them. So I use this to make sure I have that perfect rice every single time. I always like to say if you do mess up with your rice cooker, it turns out bad rice, you probably messed up somewhere along the way, right? You didn't add enough liquid, you didn't wash your rice, something. You do have to keep an eye on it. As soon as that rice cooker is done cooking, it switches to a keep warm setting. We have to get the rice out of there ASAP. And we'll get into that in a minute. But we are ready to start prepping the rest of our filling. We do have all the ingredients up here, right? This is going to be a vegetarian sushi roll. So no raw fish, right? No cooked fish. We do have some cream cheese we're going to use, and I'll talk about why in a second, but I do need to go wash my hands. Sanitation is very, very important whenever you are preparing sushi ingredients, right? All this food is eaten raw. It's ready to eat. It's going to be consumed without any further cleaning, preparation, cooking, any of that. So we're going to prep our ingredients here. We'll start with our cucumber. I'm sure by now you've taken a few years of culinary. You know how to prep some vegetables, hopefully. When we're making, when we're preparing all of our ingredients for our sushi filling, we talk about flavor with all food, right? Whenever we're crafting a dish, we talk about how the flavors mix together. But with sushi, we also need to talk about texture, right? We need to look at how that piece of sushi feels when you bite into it, right? With our rice, we talked about having that perfect, a little bit of bite to it, almost like it's al dente, right? Just like pasta, this rice has a little bit of extra texture to it. With our filling, we have to be concerned with texture as well. Inside of our cucumber are obviously seeds. If you've never had one, they are totally edible, but they're mushy, right? So I don't want to use that in my sushi. So we're going to gently scrape the seeds out here. Be careful not to scrape out the filling. Just the seeds. With our cucumbers, we're going to cut them into even-sized pieces. I could tell you that you need to have a perfect bâtonnet, that traditional French cut here, but we really care about consistency, and maybe that bâtonnet is a little bit too thick. I may not want as much of a crunch. As long as our knife cuts are consistent here, that's what we want. As you're cutting the cucumber, remember you scrape those seeds out, it will shift on you, right? If you're not careful, you can cut your fingertips off, so be careful. And depending on the shape, you might need to trim off part of the edge here, just to make it a little more consistently sized. A little bit of carrot. Should always be working over a trash bowl, never over the trash can, right? Because if you drop the carrot, it falls into the trash bowl rather than the trash can. I can still use this product. I don't want raw chicken guts all over my vegetables that I'm about to eat raw. Okay. We're going to trim the ends off here. Cut this down to a more manageable size. I always like to cut off a small portion on the side, make a nice flat level surface, and make my knife cuts from there. We do have a good bit of waste here, right? All these carrot scraps, the cucumber seeds. At the university, what we do is we collect all of these vegetable scraps that don't get turned into stock or soup, all the leftover food that doesn't get eaten, and we donate it to a pig farm, right? They take all those scraps, they cook it down, they feed it to the animals. I don't know if we get it back as bacon and pork chops, nice little pork roast, right? House-fed bacon. Some of our scallions here are pretty thick, so what we're doing is just carefully splitting them down the middle here. We're going to continue that cut for our garnish portion. But remember, we're not using any of the white root here, so that's all trash. We do have some cream cheese here, and we're going to use that as part of our filling. Why would I be substituting this cream cheese for fish? What's different about, or what's similar about those two items? Consistency, right? The texture of the cream cheese, the texture of the fish. They're both very fatty. I'm using the cream cheese here to help mimic the fattiness of the fish. I could also use avocado. I actually like it better in my sushi rolls, but I can't get ripe avocados everywhere I go, so we use the cream cheese instead.
Does tofu work?
It's very crumbly, even when you marinate it. All right, so our rice is cooked. If we notice here, though, there is a little bit of caramelization on the side here. All right, so I'll hold this up. We have a little bit of coloring here. The problem with that, that's where the starches have started to cook together. They've caramelized, right? You're getting that Maillard reaction. That probably tastes really good, right? I could do that intentionally. Maybe I'll do my rice in a peel-off method. I'll saute up some garlic and some onions, peppers, add the rice, cook that down. As I continue to cook, the bottom of the rice is going to end up being crunchy. It's going to be crispy. People fight over that in certain families. But it's not sticky anymore, and I need sticky rice. So this I actually can't use, so that I'm going to throw away. But the rest of this rice is perfect. Now, this is bland, unseasoned rice, right? All we did was rinse it, add some water, and cooked it. If you go to a grocery store and you buy sushi, this is what they use. 9 times out of 10, totally bland, unseasoned rice. It's cheap. That's why the grocery store sushi is so cheap. It also doesn't taste very good because it's not seasoned, right? But, thank you.
I'm learning the routine.
But the other thing about grocery store sushi is they can make it, let's say we make it right now, I can still sell it this time tomorrow, right? They can hold it for 24 hours and still sell it to you. So it doesn't always taste the greatest because it might be old. If I go to a restaurant, they're going to make it in front of me, right? Anybody ever been to a sushi restaurant? They have that little bar area where you can sit there and watch them. It's kind of cool. But those places also use the traditional sushi seasoning, right? That's what this is called, sushi seasoning. It's a mixture of rice wine vinegar, salt, and sugar. It's a throwback to how sushi used to be. Like 500 years ago, it was a method of pickling fish. Nowadays, we just add the little bit of souring for flavor, right? So you get the acidity, you get some sweetness from the sugar, some salt, right? And this gives it the base flavor. They will use this rice for all the different rolls that they make. But we're only making one roll today, right? One type of vegetarian roll. So what I like to do is add some additional seasoning. This takes my vegetarian roll, makes it taste from okay to really good, right? Adding that extra flavor. And that's what this is here. This is a rice seasoning blend. It's a mixture of sesame seeds, seaweed, a few other things in there. We don't need very much, right? A little bit goes a long way. And we're going to mix this all in together. All right. Not very difficult to do. The key here is not to crush the rice. You want to separate all the kernels. You notice here I'm using a little plastic spatula. This is what comes with a rice cooker. You could use a wooden spoon. You could use a rubber spatula. Don't use metal, all right, for 2 reasons. One, this rice cooker bowl has a nonstick coating in it. If you use metal, you'll scrape that right off, destroy the bowl. Have your mother yell at you at home, right? You just ruined it. Also, with this seasoning mixture, depending on the type of metal that you're using, it can leave behind a metallic taste in your rice. The acidity from the vinegar is reacting with the metal. We don't want that flavor in our rice. You see that more with like aluminum spoons, that kind of thing, but no metal. So we're going to spread this out into a nice thin layer. We need this rice to cool down. The rice, while it's hot, isn't very sticky. As it cools down, it gets stickier. But if you've ever had fried rice the next day, you know that once rice gets cold, it dries out, right? You go to heat up your fried rice from yesterday, it's very crunchy, it's very hard, right? You don't want to eat it. You have to add some extra moisture to rehydrate the rice. With this, we want to make sure that our rice doesn't dry out as it's cooling. So what we do here is we use a damp towel, clean towel, right? And we cover the rice. What happens here is the heat can still escape through the fibers, but because it's damp, it's going to lock in the moisture. It's going to keep your rice very sticky. Takes a few minutes to cool down. It also helps, so this table is metal. It conducts heat very well. So if I move the tray around on this metal table, it'll actually cool down faster. So our rice is cooled, it's ready to go. So what we have here is a bamboo mat or a sushi mat. That's what we use to roll the sushi. You do have to have one in order to make the sushi. Mine here is coated in plastic wrap to help prevent the rice from sticking to the bamboo. If you don't have the plastic wrap there and the rice gets in between the bamboo sticks, it's very difficult to clean. It's hard to get the rice out of those cracks. So I coat mine in the plastic wrap. It helps with the rolling, it helps with the cleanup. Our last ingredient that we have to roll sushi is this. It is our nori. This is roasted seaweed. It is very delicate. That's why I'm carefully trying to pry apart the layers. It's also extremely sensitive to moisture. So right now, if I was to crumble that up, it would fall apart into a lot of little pieces. If I was to leave that out on the table for 5 minutes, it'd be ruined, right? It's extremely sensitive to the humidity in the room. That's why that bag has a seal on it, to make sure that all those pieces stay fresh. Your nori has two sides to it. Your shiny side, okay, see how it reflects the light just a little bit? And the rough side. There's an increase in texture here. You can see it just by glancing at it. It's not quite as glossy as the other side. This is the side that we put the rice on. We start by lining up the edge of the nori with the edge of our roller here. We have to be able to pinch those two edges together when we go to roll. Could I get some hot water?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you so much. As we go to add the rice, we want to uncover only as much rice as we need to work with at one time. We don't have a lot of rice in this pan. Typically, when we're making the rice, I might make 10 or 20 cups of rice at one time. So quite a bit. We want to make sure that all the rice stays moist, doesn't dry out on us. I'm right-handed, so I tend to manipulate the rice with my right hand. I hold the nori in place with my left. If you're left-handed, do the opposite. If you're ambidextrous, make up your mind, right? So we're going to add a bit of rice here. Carefully place the rice on the nori, and we're going to gently spread it out into a nice even layer. We're not going to cover all of the nori, just a small portion in the middle. We need about 1/2 inch bare on the side closest to you, so this top side, and about 1/4 inch bare on the opposite. As we're working, I try to be even with my additions here. So I start with one edge, filling that in, working my way across, making sure that's filled in. We want to make sure that we fill in all of the edges, right? If we have any gaps in our nori, once we go to cut it, it will crumble, it'll fall apart, it won't be any good. Eventually, with practice, you can do it the traditional way of leaving the rice on the outside of the roll. But in the meantime, we're going to leave it on the inside. We're going to add a little bit of cream cheese here, slightly off center, right? We're going to add enough of this other piece to fill in the rest of that length here. And I'm going to get this fat off my gloves. Again, if I have that fat touching the nori, when I go to roll it, it won't seal properly.
If you were to do it the traditional way, do you need a second mat to put on top? Or just
You flip the whole thing over. You have to be very careful and very quick. Right now what's happening is the moisture from the rice is actually hydrating the nori. It's actually making it stronger, but it also sticks to the plastic wrap. So if you don't work quickly and flip it over while it's still in that hydration process, it tends to stick. Next we add our cucumber. It's a little bit large. I'm going to line up one end of the cucumber so it's even with the edge of the nori, and my other end is going to stick out. All right? This way when I go to cut it, I have some extra height to my plate. I'm going to add some carrots. I like to add them in the front. What we're doing here is we're carefully blocking off the cream cheese. When you go to roll the sushi, you have to touch the filling, no way around it. So if I can use the rest of my ingredients to make a barrier, I can roll this without having to touch the cream cheese. Simple filling, right? If you want to do this at home, you can buy the tuna, right? If you want, you don't have to. You can just do vegetable sushi like we have here. But our next step is to dampen these exposed edges of nori. So I'm going to use the moisture behind me and gently brush it onto the nori. Remember, this is still dry. It's very delicate, it's very brittle. So if you're too aggressive with your brushing, you'll rip the nori. As you're adding the moisture, you'll notice a color change. The nori gets darker. All right. So what we're going to do here, we're going to pinch the edge of the roller and the nori together. We use the rest of our fingers to hold the filling in place. We bring this up and forward. And now we need to separate the nori at the front from the roller and tuck it down. Just like that, all the way across. This is the part that most people struggle with, trying to understand what I'm doing with my hands at this stage. What we're going to do here is I'm applying some slight downward pressure to roll the sushi roll forward while I'm inching the roller upwards in my hand, right? So we're kind of bringing it up just like this, one side at a time. I'm still using just my thumb and my index finger to pull this forward. The excess part of the sushi mat is collecting in between my thumb and index fingers. It's probably actually easier to see on that side, isn't it? From the side. All right, and we've reached the edge of the mat here. So what we're going to do is wrap this whole thing back around the sushi roll. I like to check my edges, make sure I don't have anything sticking out too much. And we're going to apply gentle pressure here to shape the roll. Right, the sushi roll should be formed into a cylinder, right? And then we're going to cut it into medallions. However, if you have some skill, maybe a little bit down the road, you can turn this into different shapes. So for example, if I was to apply pressure here and make this a point on one end, I could turn this into a teardrop shape, right? I just broke up with my girlfriend. I need tear-shaped sushi to mourn my single status now. Or you have a week and a half until Valentine's Day. If I make that same point and I make an indentation at the top, I can turn this into a heart shape. Charge you guys twice as much money for heart-shaped sushi on Valentine's Day. You'd be surprised what people will pay for. So we're going to unwrap this just like that, and we're going to set it there for just a minute while we transition. One of the tricks to slicing this sushi apart, give it that minute to rest, right? Just like when you're done cooking a steak, you shouldn't cut right into it right away. You need to let your meat rest for a few minutes. Same with our sushi here. What we're doing is we're letting that nori finish hydrating, right, and sticking together. In order to cut sushi, you need an extremely sharp knife. The roll itself is very delicate, right? It doesn't have a whole lot of strength to it. So you kind of have to understand how knives work, right? With the regular knife, when you go to slice, you use a lot of downward pressure to cut through the object. The sharper the knife, the less pressure is required. So you could go out and spend $500 on a sushi knife, right? That's razor thin, it can slice wind in half. But why spend the money? You guys don't know if you want to be a sushi chef, right? Instead, what's a lot easier for you guys starting out is use a serrated knife instead. All right, the teeth here, these serrations, allow me to gently rip and tear the nori apart into a nice clean cut. It also helps if you have a little bit of moisture on the knife, right? That's why I have this massive container of water, not because I need all the water, but to dip my knife in there. So this is rested long enough. We're going to go ahead and cut this. I'm going to turn this around. As you go to cut, remember the end pieces are the most delicate, they're the most likely to fall apart, so be careful with your first cut. Because of the shape of my knife, I have this bolster here at the end. If I'm not careful, I'll miss cutting through the bottom portion of the nori. I need to make sure I make full contact with the cutting board. So a little moisture and gentle sawing motion. Use the full length of the knife to cut through the nori. Very, very little pressure, right? Let gravity pull the knife down. All you're doing is sawing back and forth.
Are you going to cut the whole thing like that?
What do you mean?
With that blade?
Yep. As you're working with the knife, you might notice that the rice builds up on the knife, cream cheese builds up on the knife, avocado, whatever you're using will build up on the knife. If you dip it back in your pot and you carefully wipe it off, you can clean the blade, re-dampen it, and continue cutting. Typically, you get about 10 to 12 pieces out of a roll of sushi. There's a few more of us in that today, so we'll go for a couple extra pieces. If we need to, we can make another roll. And as we reach the other end, remember it's just as delicate as the first one, so be careful with your cutting there. So we need to plate this now. We have a nice, beautiful plate in front of us. All right, if you didn't know, pretty plates make your food look better, right? But so does how you present it. So while that is a pretty plate, if I was to place that right there, it doesn't look very appealing, right? We need to add some visual appeal here. So what I prefer to do is we're going to shingle the roll out, set the pieces on a slight angle so we can see part of the filling, not all of it, but just enough to give you a hint of what's inside. I like to shingle it into an S curve. This does two things. It fills up more of the plate, so it looks like you're getting more food than you actually are. But also, it's more visually appealing, right? Instead of a straight line, I get some extra texture to my eyes, if you will. Same with our height here. This piece of cucumber is sticking out. It adds a little bit of extra dimension to our plate. Sometimes you'll see they'll put, like this one, other types of vegetables standing out. Maybe they'll use tail-on shrimp, right? They cook it, they leave the tail on, and it sticks out of the shrimp there, right? And then the rest of the roll has shrimp that's fully cooked without the tail inside of it. Sushi is traditionally only ever served with soy sauce. So, sure, let's add a little soy sauce. Great, but I already said we have a garnish, right? So we're gonna add that in a second, but we're not traditional. We seasoned our rice with something other than sushi seasoning. So we're gonna add a little bit of sauce as well, okay? This is sriracha-based spicy mayonnaise. So if you ever had sriracha, you know it is very spicy, but because it's mixed with the mayonnaise, it's gonna reduce the intensity of the spice, right? Instead of burning your mouth, it should just tingle. So I like to do this in a nice little drizzle right over top. Not too much, but just enough to add the color and the flavor. My garnish is the scallion, but what do you not see on this plate that you typically see with sushi? I'm sorry? Seeds, maybe, is a garnish. Fish, okay, not all the time though. Wasabi, what sits next to the wasabi?
Ginger, eh?
Yeah,
It's that like perfume tasting.
it's pickled ginger. All right, anyone know what that ginger is used for? No? Do you know what the pickled ginger is used for though on the plate?
It's like toe cleaner.
Very good. It serves as a palate cleanser. You eat a piece of that pickled ginger, it washes all the other flavors out of your mouth, and then you can enjoy the delicate flavors of whatever you're about to eat. A lot of times you see they'll eat it in between rolls, right? Maybe I have a California roll and then I go to a spicy tuna roll. I don't necessarily want all the same flavors, even though they have some similar ingredients. If you're the type of person that adds the wasabi and the pickled ginger and the soy sauce to every single piece, no judgment, but that's not what it's meant for. As with the wasabi, I do have some wasabi mayonnaise. Again, same principle. Because it's mixed with the mayonnaise, it reduces the intensity of the burn. However, this is a different type of heat than your sriracha. Sriracha is pepper-based, so it's going to burn your mouth. The wasabi is it's a root. It actually burns the olfactory node inside your nose. burns for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then it disappears. So we're gonna add this in a nice gentle layer over about half the roll. We're gonna add our garnish here. I like to add it to the top of each piece. This way we add just a little bit of extra height element. Not too much, right? So we're adding some extra color, we're adding some extra height, but we're also incorporating part of the flavor that's already in the roll. So we're kind of reusing the product. We have the extra flavor, but this garnish actually ties in with the rest of the roll as well. So whenever you're picking garnishes, you don't really want to just pick something because it looks good on the plate. You want it to incorporate some element that's already in the dish.